Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to another edition of APAC Dialogue. We have with us today one of the pioneers of Indian telecom industry, Mr. Shivaji Chatterjee, Senior Vice President and Business Head of the Enterprise Business Unit at Hughes Communication. Uh, Welcome to the show, Shivaji. Before we start the interaction, perhaps it makes sense to talk a little bit about APAC News Network. We are a media organization headquartered out of Noida with a pan India presence and with focus across government, education, enterprise, BFSI, healthcare, and different other manufacturing, startup, and other sectors. So today's interaction, we would like to hear more about the updates on what youth communication has been doing in India and what are its future plans. Thank you.
So, why don't you start with the roles and responsibilities and things that you look after in Hughes?
Hi. So I'm Shivaji Chatterjee. I'm Senior Vice President and look after the enterprise SME, the entire networking business of Hughes Communications India. So I'm coming close to completing 25 years in July in the company. So it's been a long run. And my role encompasses managing every element of the business from sales, marketing, program management, fulfillment, supply chain operations, engineering. So it's field services, etc. So it's an end-to-end portfolio. Hughes Communications, of course, has been operating in the country since February 95. So it's been over 27 years of operations. And while the company has been known as the pioneer for satellite networking and VSAT communication services, we've grown our portfolio manifold to have many, many different lines of business. Of course, satellite communication is an important line. It's the bread and butter of the company. We have close to 200,000 VSATs across the length and breadth of the country. We have satellite integration that we do, 4G cellular backhauling, many different applications powered by satellite networks. But we also have a very strong complementary suite of managed services, which we provide SD-WAN services, terrestrial, LTE, bonding services, security, etc. So it's really a dual portfolio of pure satellite communication space technologies as well as managed services to the enterprise, which is a single window technology and media agnostic service which incorporates the best of terrestrial, wireless, and satellite communication in giving a solution. So that's really primarily the portfolio that we have. And within that, there are, of course, multiple services segments which then are customized based on the need.
Okay, thank you. Let's focus more on the managed services part for the enterprises. You mentioned some of the offerings there, but if you can elaborate in terms of the say, I would like to separately discuss enterprises and SMEs, as you mentioned. So, first for enterprises, what will be the top three or four the solutions or services that you are offering, and what sort of enterprises? If you can give some use cases which would illustrate how they are leveraging some of those services. Enterprises, I'm talking first.
Sure. So when we started off, it was all satellite communications. We had a very good portfolio of enterprise customers, but we started going into managed services when we realized that terrestrial connectivity, the need for bandwidth, lower latency, would drive the needs at least of the bigger urban locations of enterprises. So that's where we got into incorporating terrestrial MPLS solutions into our portfolio. Where I'd say in the last 5 to 7 years, we've really done a pioneering work is bringing LTE. It started with 3G and then LTE into the enterprise. I think being a telco agnostic and a friend to all the telcos, we've created alliances with all the different cellular telco companies and incorporated their portfolio. For example, we've been giving solutions with two or three LTEs which are bonded in a kind of diversity load balancing manner with our own products and solutions to the customers. So, an Indian customer typically for an enterprise side would only go for MPLS, and they were typically RF MPLS. That's the general norm. We brought in another option, which is dual LT, triple LT, which bonding could give speeds of 4 to 8 Mbps. So that really provided a very different solution. And what really made the LT solution even more attractive is because of the fast adoption of 4G in India in the last 5 years, the amount of towers which have come up which provide 4G service is reached about 80 to 90% of the country. So our bonded LTE solutions could actually go much beyond what MPLS could offer and actually give a divergent path. What we didn't see happening and now which is more or less the norm, especially with the pandemic, is cloud applications, right? Even today, maybe 2 years back before the pandemic, video conferencing was nice to have for meetings, right? Today it's the norm. Yeah, even a small branch of a bank talks to its regional and corporate office. There's a video call done, and now that's become a business application. And obviously, most video conferencing is using some cloud. It's on Google or Teams or Zoom, one such platform. So that's really, that's just one example, but it's a very bandwidth hungry example. Like that, there are tremendous number of cloud applications which any enterprise or bank or service use, a retail store. And that really brought the whole LTE architecture very easy to use and connect. And now I think this whole transition has started happening from MPLS links, which are restrictive in speed and very nailed connections connecting to the data center. I think the whole architecture is changing into a very open cloud, local breakout into the internet, high capacity links. There are a lot of broadband service providers which are coming and partnering with us. There's wireless internet service providers, all providing last mile capacities and connections. So you really have a very changing ecosystem, not just here and the world. I think our managed service suite is very well engineered to really leverage that solution and be able to provide connectivity. So that's really, I'll say, in terms of the base platform. And the SD WAN is the other thing, which then becomes a very needed solution. Because when you have high speed local breakouts, the security, the need to have quality of service, the need to build firewall and those elements at the local end, and also make a very easy management of the whole network. That's where SD-WAN came in. So what we did is, apart from just these alliances, we started building our own products. So we built a single LT, dual LT, triple LT bonded. We built our own SD-WAN CPE and platform. In fact, the biggest SD-WAN job awarded in India came to us this quarter. So Indian Oil awarded us 10,800 retail outlets connectivity on dual LT using our SD-WAN platform, using the Hughes India developed made in India solution. And that really, I think, is a big testimony to A, the need for such solutions and architecture, B, I think how Hughes India has really stepped up into this whole framework, and of course the Make in India customization, because we were able to beat the biggest telecom providers, service providers, all the biggest global SD-WAN companies in able to give this solution. So it's not a small feat.
So, taking this point further, you mentioned Obviously, some of your legacy is an advantage, especially in the double LT and the triple LT. That legacy of those VSAT thing gives you an advantage. Now, my question is, some of these areas is managed services that you mentioned, correctly mentioned, there are so many global competitors. Even India, the large data center providers, they are also offering many of these solutions. So, what will be your unique differentiators apart from that legacy thing? That obviously that satellite legacy gives you a advantage. If nothing else, even as a brand itself, gives a lot of brand equity. But other than that, how are you differentiating itself from lot of so much competitors in the market? That is one part of the question. The second part is it's a more a go-to-market question. You mentioned about you're working closely with the wireless providers, or so. What sort of, is it a consortium kind of model? Since now you are having your own products also, the ones you mentioned. So, is it typically you go in a consortium go-to-market with tied up with these wireless providers or cloud service providers, other, so because as you rightly again mentioned, a lot of applications are on cloud. So how is this thing evolving, this consortium model?
Okay, so there are two parts.
Two
One is
parts.
differentiation, and second is go to market ecosystem, right?
Mm.
So the differentiation, uh, you're very right that being a company in India for 25 years, you have a good customer base and you're able to upsell them into solutions as the network evolves, right? From just a small bandwidth to high bandwidth, from private networks to cloud networks, security coming in. So the network keeps evolving, and now you have a lot of AI and ML also coming into managing and predicting outages in the network. So that's very much a big part of our differentiation. One is having customers, having a name, because when there's such a anything which has a big jump, it's always the name and the services that you're known for. The other important thing is having every element stitched up, right? There's a portal, there's a platform, there's a CP which is simple and needs to connect different media. There's different kind of capacities which are needed, right? Whether it's wireless, terrestrial, or satellite. So we have built partnerships on all of these. So I think firstly in India, just bringing the right bouquet in a cost effective, non, I'll say, without trying to plug in anything, being truly open. I think that is a big difference. If you go with a certain mindset that I'm only going to sell this, like even on SD-WAN, we have three solutions, right? We have one partnership with the Gartner Quadrant company. We have one with a Make in India full-fledged SD-WAN company, and we've done two projects. In fact, one of the biggest multinational uh, oil retailers in India, about 500 of their locations have been connected since the last 2 years with this SD-WAN solution.
With the
Uh,
making India made.
Make in India, but not Hughes made in India, because it's a full fledged SD WAN with the next gen firewall, WAN optimizer, etc. Another project we are doing with the same solution is for Siemens, for all the Jhelum Tavi flood relief. So for
Okay.
all their locations, again they have two, three media, but powered by this solution. And then of course for much, I'll say the entry level SD WAN, because everyone doesn't need the full stack, right? Many people just want manageability, they want visibility, they want to be able to connect with basic capacities and have a very low maintenance. So for that we built our own entry level, which is say what Indian Oil is used. So I'll say it's being truly flexible, it's being open, and it's being able to fill up every element of the ecosystem so that you go with a bouquet and ask the customer to choose. I think that's the best thing when you go to a good portal, whether it's to buy an air ticket or whether it's to see a movie. If you find that that portal is trying to push a certain airline
Then
or trying to push a certain movie, you won't feel good about it. But if you go and you find, oh, it's Make My Trip and they are really airline agnostic or hotel agnostic, then as a customer you feel we are come. So managed services is something like that. You go with a bouquet and you basically customize it and ask the customer to choose. So I think that is the big part of it, being truly open. In terms of the go to market strategy, as you know, to build this bouquet, some things are in house, some things are with partners. And the beauty in India, if you really have good relationships, your partner can be your customer, your partner can be your vendor, your partner can be somebody who's selling through you or selling your things to the customer. So examples are this our own product portfolio. Companies like Sifi, Tata Teleservices, Tata Communications. Are they not big companies? Whenever they sell an LT solution in India, they sell our solution,
Okay.
our product. So not just the hardware, but even the service. They buy the LT service from us because we have perfected the art of buying from different cellular companies, putting it together, giving it very affordably, so that even they can take our solution and go and sell it and still provide a value proposition to the
But
customer.
doesn't it, in some sense, cannibalize because you will be approaching the same enterprises with those kind of LT services? What a CP or a Tata Communication will approach, you will approach also the similar customers, and you yourselves, it's your products and services, as you rightly mentioned. So they are in some way reselling your services and products, but then when you are also directly approaching the customers, isn't there a
See, it's an ocean, and firstly, each one have their own. You know, when there are many people who go to fish in the ocean, they if you're smart enough, you don't go after the same fish. You all know you have a bigger boat which goes deeper into the waters. You have a small boat which can only go few kilometers. So it's exactly that example. A company like Tata Communication is a big boat. They go deep. They will get the biggest customers. So they definitely have relationships. They are a VSNL legacy. So they have a very strong base. So it's like much bigger. Tata Teleservices is the arm of Tata Group which focuses only on MSMEs.
yes?
So for them, their focus is also different. So we can't go with what they are able to put so many things as a bundle, as you said, data center, cloud. I mean, it's very different. What an Airtel, which is a joint venture partner now of Hughes, they also take our products to the market. Their whole reach, their whole sales strength is far far higher than us. So firstly, we are very clear that our reach, our base, our core markets, which we go direct sales, are very focused and limited. We have certain strong segments, so that's where it is. If ever there's a conflict, that's where the relationship happens, to manage the conflict without much issue. And because I think the natural way it has happened, I hardly know of any such conflict which is
Okay.
there. And
So
if
which of
there's
these segments are the stronger ones?
for us,
Yes.
yeah, I'll say that all the like banking is very strong, education is very strong, oil retail is very strong, government and defense is very strong. I'll say these are some movie distribution, I'll say theater connectivity. So these are all segments I'll say which are very, very strong in. Segments which I feel some of these companies are very strong in multinationals, manufacturing companies, some of the new age companies like retail and insurance and IT. Those are all areas we've not been very strong. And what we've seen, the way they have taken some of our solutions, including VSAT, and being able to sell it there, that's where the benefit is because they have the access. So I think that's where we also know that where our strengths is, where our limitation is, where we need to work. And I think our whole idea is not to show that we are the best direct sales force. And again, you need to have the right solution
Right.
set such that it supports partners. So and you still are not outpriced in the market. So I think that is the key thing. Many places, if you have a very expensive phone and you say I'm going to sell it in the market like this, and then there are margins which are added up, then that product will not sell. Even an Apple has changed its India strategy to make it more affordable, and by really supporting the dealer ecosystem better. And that's how today it's really succeeded. to the extent, because you have to make those. If you, it's not a supplier's market anymore, even
Exactly.
for a brand like Apple, because an Indian customer looks at value. So if it's not within their budget, if it is not the best among comparable options, they won't go for it, right? A small set will go for it blindly, but the majority will not go for it.
Okay, so I'll put a more topical question. The scenario in the last 2 years during the pandemic and some of the verticals you mentioned, like say education was one. Obviously, education, a lot of this, the bandwidth requirements, and the whole education was done online. Uh, so education was one example, can be any other sector for that matter, which was primarily working from anywhere. Now, the working from anywhere, what that meant was, while earlier the workforce majorly we can say was concentrated in the top cities, now employees had, in many cases, had gone back to their respective places, and so the quality of bandwidth still we know is not uniform across the country. So what were the challenges at that time? And there were also disruptions in the supply chain during that time. So how did you manage and how did you help the customers, especially when, and it happened very fast. Also, it was not that okay, you had
Yeah, yeah.
prepared and long. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Firstly, we all manage as individuals. I think the bigger, I mean, what we did as a company, I still says collective people think and work. Individually, every home had such a challenge. So I'll say it's something which everybody was going through. It's not like there's an earthquake which happened and affected one locality, right? So I think that everyone sailing in the same boat, I think at least brought the spirits up. uh, I'll say there were two extremes for us. There were some customer segments which became hyper dependent on us, right? Because we were running what is called essential services for them. So whether it's a government working, police working, which we connect, whether it was financial inclusion, rural bank branches. I mean, that's the, if you ask me, the biggest example. So what happened is people went back. Now, the Jandhan accounts, which is the Prime Minister's initiative for financial inclusion, that's where the direct benefit transfer, if you remember in the early days of the pandemic, the central government announced that all people within a certain bracket, they would get directly some X amount of money into their bank accounts. So those, all those bank accounts, whether those are NABARD linked scheduled banks, whether they're regional rural banks or very rural banks of the nationalized bank, they are 70 to 80% running on our VSAT services. And as a result, those became critical. People used to go in every day to collect money, and those bank branches, it was absolutely critical. So those, I'd say the transaction level in a rural branch went up because the people went, and the need to go to the bank was more because they were not earning their daily money. So the only source of income was withdrawing from the bank. So I'll say that that was ATMs. I mean, what we saw demonetization now, it's not even a word is used these days, right? It used to be the only word used for 1 or 2 years. But now you cash is back as king and life is normal. And I think that's all this is because I think the pandemic brought the need for cash, need for access to the banks, retail networks, all those things. So I'll say that that was one thing. We had to be hyper alert. All the challenges of no public transport, security, motivation of engineers, their safety. So all those things we of course managed. We had hubs which had to run. We never had a single uh, even a minute when nobody was manning them. So all that happened. And of course you had places which were affected, like schools were closed, retail locations were closed, coaching centers were closed, movie theaters were closed. So wherever people get together as a public congregation, so those kind of retail mass networks, those were shut, and they kept. It was like on and off. Theaters were open, theaters were shut, 50%. Not Maharashtra, yes, Maharashtra, everything. So we kept adapting to those things. We supported those customers. For example, today every movie which gets distributed in India gets distributed by Hughes. I don't know if you're aware.
Okay.
Every theater has a VSAT, right? There are two companies, UFO Movies and
Mm,
Cube.
mm.
They have 4,000 and 3,000 VSATs each across these 7,000 theaters. So all the movies get distributed digitally today to the theaters. They're stored on a server, and then the exhibitor, the theater owner, decides, okay, I'm going to play this movie 4 shows, this movie 5 shows, this movie 1 show. If it flops, then some other movie, KGF 2 is brought back for more shows. So that's all possible because of digital cinema. So that's what we did. But we realized that this on off was there, so we supported those customers. We gave them a break. We didn't charge them for a few months because ISRO we have fixed charges. So we worked out those models to sustain them because they were also hit. Suddenly they have a base, they have a depreciation that can't be just
Obvious.
put on pause. So I'll say we did those win lose, semi lose lose to minimize the overall. We didn't create a win lose scenario. We
Obviously.
supported customers through these times, the on off times. Some networks like school networks stayed off. Some which were government networks like for Uttarakhand, we run 600 schools for the e-education, and it's a very successful network. But during the pandemic, the schools were shut. But what the government decided to do was run it to administer local self governance. So they
Okay.
had all their people coming in there, and then the chief minister, health minister, they used to every week address all the people. So that's the way, even to keep the motivation high of it. And maybe they got re-elected, so some of this
So,
paid
out
off.
of some of these big verticals, like government, education, retail, or banking that you're mentioning, which are some of the large deployments, and very briefly, what sort of use cases these are there, say in government, like the Uttarakhand one you mentioned, or some police you are also
Yeah.
mentioning. So, which are some of these large government deployments?
For government, I'll say one is BharatNet itself, because
Okay.
that whole project happened at the start of the pandemic. We started the project. It was like, I don't know, it was timed. But we have deployed 5,500 locations which could not be reached by fiber for BharatNet in the most remote locations of India.
Obviously.
In fact, we have got lauded so much that next week the PMO has called us that how can we do more? I mean, because we know what's happened on the fiber.
Mm.
It's gone into all kinds of things now. BBNL BSNL merger is happening, but definitely that network is not only the deployment, but how the upkeep of
Management.
it is, and how whether the end users are really using the network, right? I mean, the central government is really interested in that. So that's a big project that we did in Jammu and I mean, it's about 15 states, but mainly in the most remote areas, Ladakh, J&K, all the northeast. I think 70% was in the northeast states. So that's a big network that we do. For the banks, every bank uses our network for connecting both, I'll say, semi-urban branches on backup and rural branches. A lot of the dual LTE solutions are also widely deployed because now it's kind of integrated into our offering. We even have a box which does a VSAT come LTE as a single box. So that's another example. Every ATM in India is connected on VSAT. I'll say 90%, and
90%.
10% is on 4G. So that's something. The white label ATM guys, which are mainly three companies: Hitachi, India One, and Tata Communication Payment Services. They have been deploying networks more than the banks have been rolling out ATMs. These guys have been rolling out ATMs because they've got the license. So today, IndiCash, India One,
GP.
Money Plant, you're seeing these brands which were not there. They're not bank ATMs. They're private ATM companies. So that's something which has grown in scale. Of course, a lot of education networks, disaster management networks for police, fire, emergency response, VSAT, which is in the suitcase. So you can just take it out, and the user in 10 minutes installs it and goes live with Wi-Fi in a surrounding periphery. So those kind of solutions, which are very uniquely, VSAT. There's a cyclone which is hit, so they just take it in the suitcase, start, and the connectivity is there, and they're able to do emergency response. For the Indian Navy, we run a network where every ship, every submarine, and every airplane of Indian Navy is connected with the Hughes technology. So the whole Navy, it's called ICNS, the flagship network of the Indian Navy, which extends from Cape of Good Hope in South Africa right till the Australia. The whole Indian Ocean is covered. A network that we did last year for a USO project was with Reliance Jio, where we connected over 100 locations with 4G backhaul services. So each site getting about 8 to 10 Mbps of service, and that's using the HTS service. So one thing good ISRO did is 2 3 years back they launched 2 or 3 satellites which were higher speed satellites. So in fact, it was the first project we did was for Reliance Jio. Of course, BharatNet uses it, but they buy the capacity directly. So the first, Reliance Jio used our capacity, which we took from ISRO, and in fact, just in May, we started offering these services. While Reliance Jio was the first customer, we now have bought the capacity on a national basis, and now we are rolling out these services all over India for all customers. So
Okay.
even if you want to, you go to Nainital, you don't have connectivity, you want a link, you can just like a consumer buy a dish and have a connectivity, and the prices are pretty affordable. So maybe 1500, 2000 a month, you can get a broadband satellite connection. Bank branch, all our segments are now going to be able to use those kind of
So are
connectivity.
these packages when you earlier mentioned for MSMEs, the SMEs you also have? So are these offerings because SMEs I believe you will have more a bundled kind of thing because that's how they operate. So some of these things that you mentioned, this even a VSAT in a suitcase when you can just set it up, or these kind of broadband services for 1500 2000 rupees and in
Yeah.
remote areas. So are these part of the SME offerings?
Not the broadband in a suitcase, because I'll say that's still an expensive VSAT. It's
VSAT will be obviously.
No, today a VSAT costs 35,000 rupees, and if you break it up and you bundle it like the simple VSAT which goes to an SME, it's all bundled. It's not so expensive,
Okay.
Today, for an ATM site, for a cost of about, I'll say about 1500 rupees a month,
Oh,
we run the service with the VSAT, with the bandwidth, with 24 support and maintenance. No one time payment. So you can imagine what can you run for 1500 a month. If you run a 4G for 500 a month, you'll not get a nobody will come and replace your SIM or your router or whatever. For us, so that's how cost effective it is to run the network. So like that, the HTS gives the same kind of concept with little higher speeds. So yes, it's something that we've just launched. I'll still say we are trying to do some target marketing. So you may not hear about it in the you may not hear about it in the urban markets, etc. But we are targeting very hilly areas. I think we have big pockets of demand in Himachal, Arunachal, and Ladakh, Kashmir areas. So that's where the initial focus is.
so typically because obviously as I mentioned, in many of these remote areas, normally the quality of bandwidth is not standard as it's available in metro areas. So overall for these remote areas, and as you mentioning the VSAT prices are also rationalized. So how are you? Are there Northeast or Ladakh or those kind of, or whatever other areas. Even in many states there are certain remote areas. So how are you doing any approaches to sort of make this the bandwidth available at a more mass level? There may not be too many enterprises or SMEs there, but more to the B2C kind of model to reach out to the consumers there, especially for the remote areas. So, are there specific
There are a lot
offerings?
of, well, see, the nature of SME has to change. It's basically, there are a lot of government offices, there are
Mm.
schools, there are project
Bank
sites, there
branches?
are bank branches. So it's not an SME the way we think of it as a small scale factory, but these are the kind of locations which are there, and types of users which are there, mining. I mean, there are many pockets which are there. So firstly, that's there. One good thing about VSAT is it doesn't differentiate urban or rural. It's like your DTH dish. The signal is like God. You look up to the sky, God is omnipresent everywhere. So similarly, a dish which you put up in the heart of Delhi and a dish you put up in the most remotest area in Ladakh will get you the same quality signal, right? So it's the same technology. What ISRO has done, to answer your question more specifically, is they built high speed capacities only in these areas. So what they've done is across the northern region, across the eastern region, they've built satellite with capacities with high speed only there, and across the rest of the country lowers capacities, because they know for satellite these are the underserved areas, so give higher capacity there.
So, are there more applications? A lot of these GPS applications for agriculture or GIS mapping being
Yeah.
done extensively. So, are they being leveraged? This sort of availability of bandwidth is being leveraged there. So, what is your
Yeah,
experience?
so I'll say there are two parts to it. One is just the one-way part of it, which is the GIS mapping. What surveillance is happening, which is basically the satellite with radar or with high resolution cameras takes the images, right?
Mm.
That's how the Ukraine war was known that it's happening. So that's of course all those things, climate, and there are so many applications of it, right? Which are more, it's there's no, I'll say, two-way data interaction happening. What is very popular globally and which is picking up is this whole, I'll say, what is called IoT, right? Which is, the lower frequency today with VSATs are generally 12 to 28 gigahertz, which are the higher frequencies. Now, for those higher frequencies, the dishes, everything are very different. Now, the minute, that's why the cellular also, they like the lower
Low
frequencies,
frequency.
for the, it can penetrate walls and those kind of thing, and they like the higher frequencies because there's more bandwidth available there. So you need a mix of solutions. So these lower frequencies in satellite are called L band and S band,
Mhm.
which is in a 1 to 2.5 gigahertz range. And with those, you can have a low form factor device.
So, these sensors, these IoT you mentioned, these
Yeah,
manufacturing plants, they are deploying these
exactly right.
sensors.
So these sensors, in fact, what Apple has announced with Qualcomm is in the next iPhone, they are putting a chip in which will talk directly to the satellite on S band. So then your phone will have the capability that if there's no coverage, it talks to the satellite and gets it. So then you truly have a global kind of coverage. So that is what is happening. That in India, still, I'll say S band, because of the Devas legacy, has not been commercialized. They are now planning in the new space policy, and in space got inaugurated last week, and I think there'll be some changes happening. L band is used only for very select use, because again satellite phones are not freely done. So I think some of these, there's some legacy which is now coming up and opening up, right? like the GMPCS license, which was made for mobile satellite phones, is not. There's no one
Nobody.
really. There's only a BSNL Inmarsat service for strategic users of the government. So I'll say that it's going to happen. It's happening globally, and what will facilitate some of these applications even more, and I think that's the biggest excitement globally, is global constellations. So today the geostationary satellite is at 36,000 kilometers and always orbiting at the same speed as the Earth. So it always looks over the same geography. But it's the limitation is it's 36,000 kilometers. So there's a latency of half a second to
Second.
go and come. And with the 5G world and everyone are talking of very small latencies of very few
But how
milliseconds.
many applications are still there? The latency is fine, but when you are talking about the 5G, how many applications still which are, I would say, commercially viable
No,
applications?
no, I think the whole thing about 5G is it's going to bring in, every fridge, everything will start having. So I'm just saying it's like
Later.
GPS. Now, GPS, we also thought, okay, it will be used for map, but now everything is getting having a GPS inside it. So now it has become part and parcel of the existence. So I'll say the minute the devices come in, you can do so many things. So even traffic signal management can be totally dynamic, and those are real time. So I'll still say latency will play a role for real time applications like
Okay.
this, and automation of a different scale. If you want driverless car, I mean, you name it, all that will only happen if it's a very low latency network.
Mm.
You can't say ki,
Obviously,
no, no.
certain.
So that's going to happen more and more. I'll say that, especially if that latency gets magnified. What you're saying is, yes, half second is only half a second, right? But for whatever reason, if that half second gets magnified into 10, it becomes 5 seconds. Then it starts becoming material. It becomes like, now that was 2 seconds of silence and it felt like long. So, I think we should. So latency has a role. It's not the most important thing. There are so many other factors. But these low Earth orbit satellites, which SpaceX, Elon Musk, Sunil Bharti Mittal's OneWeb, and Jeff Bezos's Project Kuiper. There's a Telesat, which is in the earlier stages. So I think these constellations are looking to come and provide satellites at 800 kilometers, 1000 kilometers. So that brings
Reducing
the
time
latency down by
down.
30 times. So suddenly half a second becomes 20 milliseconds, which then becomes like any terrestrial network. So that is becoming the game changer. SpaceX has already started in some geographies. OneWeb has already started in some geographies. There's talks of it coming to India. We are sure about OneWeb because we've signed up as their partner here. By the end of next year, it will be fully available across the country. And I think that will make a big difference, because I'll say that it's not just bringing low latency, but because it's a global constellation, what is available globally is available in India too. Otherwise, for the longest time, I'll say satellite communication, whatever we've done in India, is despite the regulatory issues, despite the capacity constraints. I can't believe it that if I get what is available globally on day one in India, you feel on par with the world. I go back to the iPhone example. Go back 5 years, 7 years when an iPhone used to launch. You used to get it in India. Firstly, met lot later, grey market, double the price. I mean, there was the whole thing. Now India is an important in a market that
Most people
is
used to
here. In
buy it
fact, it's
from
getting
abroad.
manufactured here. I mean, so that's the journey. And now when you look at the transition, you feel for satellite, which world were we in that we had such constraints. Now, if we get the latest and best, the Indian market can be up there. So India is trying to catch up. I think in 3G we were so much behind the world. In 4G we are somewhat behind the world. In 5G we are sort of, I think, because of these issues. And now the government is talking more of 6G because 5G also they realize because of whatever reasons we are behind. BSNL is starting its 4G now. So we are catching up, but we are still behind. So maybe by the time 6G comes, the government's hope is India will be along with the world, and maybe 7G will be ahead of the world. So why not? But I think we are into that kind of mode with at least these new NGSO constellations will be abreast with the world, and maybe with InSpace and the Spacecom policy, India and its
The in-space one
entrepreneurs
needs.
will make us by two generations later. We may be bringing something before anyone else in the world.
So, keeping this in mind, if we look for the next, I'll say, 6 to 7 quarters, what are going to be, from a Hughes point of view, the key focus areas? Which are the areas you are going to, that can be expansion, new launches, new services, again, or whatever else? But what are these focus
I'll say
areas?
that managed services, definitely. I think this Indian oil win has boosted our belief that our product is designed for mass big market in India, giving the right balance of functionality and price. So I'll say that potential is limitless, really, because
So
this
that
transition
opens to any, yes, the
because this
third part is.
transition away from MPLS, from traditional telcos, from closed networks, I think it's going to be revolutionary. I think we'll have a press release soon. It's the first time I'm talking about it to you.
Okay.
So that's one big thing. I feel this the OneWeb is going to be something again. I think it is not evolutionary but revolutionary, that we are getting something on par with anywhere in the world. Latency, I mean, I've in satellite 25 years. Latency and satellite are like sleep in the same bed. So finally, satellite not having latency, even
It's
for
not
us as a
easy.
concept, a satellite is so close. It's like saying a plane can fly from here. You were telling me you took 2.5 hours to come from Noida to here. Suppose I tell you, listen, you can take a plane next time and make it in 15 minutes. What would you say? You'll say that's revolutionary, right? So that's what it brings. It brings you this ability to go by plane in a short distance and cut down by 20 times. So that's exactly the same example. So I think we're very excited what potential that brings. I think Wi-Fi is another big focus area. The mobility licenses opened up. So on the ships, on the planes, I think we are already providing connectivity on the seas today, which was not allowed 2 years back. That got allowed. On the planes, I think you're going to start seeing Wi-Fi being provided more and more. The business
Some bit
case
is provided already.
only to see which plays of a local server,
It's
not
more means
internet.
in yeah, it's
It's
whatever
stored
there is in the
content. Yeah,
cache.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
stored
Exactly
content.
right. Exactly. So that and then rural Wi-Fi. We really feel that the Prime Minister's vision is to reach to every household, and I feel that using this mix of satellite Wi-Fi, we'll be able to get a right ecosystem and model to be able to reach to the house, and I think we are working on certain projects like that. So that is also another very important area. And I think government itself has a lot of strategic networks. I think there's a lot of work on the defense side globally. A lot of new technologies. I think the world after this war is definitely everyone's defense budget has gone up, and even the defense sector is looking for a lot of make in India products. So we are working on those. We built a similarly ruggedized suitcase terminal for an army project, which is completely made in India. So I'll say those are things which we're going to see our innovation, which we use for networks, be also applied for strategic users of the government. So I think these are all some of the focus areas to use. I think this capacity liberation on satellite, the managed service, if we can really hit a sweet spot like that and work with partners, really
Perfect.
to access parts of the customer base which we can't.
Thanks.
Yeah,
See
thank you.